You made this problem.
Another, Tavis, one of the things you get to in your book, of course, a key theme is accountability. And Steve, I want to first pose this question to you. A nerve was touched this week. Jon Stewart on The Daily Show raised some really tough questions for CNBC and other financial journalists about who was out there before this crisis came upon us to sound the alarm and say what was happening in our financial industry was fundamentally unsound. And so it goes to a question, I guess, Steve, of who can you point to in financial journalism who, would get the award for sounding the alarm and saying, hey, wait a minute, guys, there's something we really ought to be paying attention to here?
Well, first of all, that nerve was right back here, right in the back of my neck, which is the one that was touched. Look, I can't sit here as a spokesman for CNBC. That's not my job. I'm not management. I'm a reporter on the staff.
And this is broader. This is not just about CNBC. It's about financial journalism.
I've been reporting on the subprime crisis since 2006. I did investigative work in 2007 that said the subprime crisis, despite what the Treasury Secretary and the Federal Reserve Chairman were saying, was going to spread beyond that. I think there's a lot of reporters at CNBC who've done a lot of work on that. I was a finalist for the Emmys when it came to that, and my reporting in 2006, 2007. There were reporters at the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, all who have done great work on the subprime crisis. Could we have screamed louder? Almost certainly. Did we explain enough what was going on? Probably not, but we were out there, we were doing it. The fact that they didn't notice is not my problem.
I think part of the reason this has caught such fire in the American public this week is that we saw this in 2003 with the run-up to the war in Iraq, where there was a failure of political journalists to ask the tough questions of the administration as we went into Iraq about weapons of mass destruction. President Bush was not hauled over the coals in the way that, for example, Tony Blair was back in Britain. But in this case, it's even more complicated because we rely on financial journalists. Most of us, and the American public in general, this is very complicated stuff. We don't have the jargon, we don't have the technical expertise, so we have to have the financial journalists acting
but there's a fundamental question, Tavis, which is, what is it that should have been said or exposed prior to everything going south? Because it gets to the larger question of precisely what caused this.
Pardon my English, you ain't got enough time for that answer, David, because there's a whole lot that should have been exposed. Let's be honest about it. The bottom line is one word: greed. Wall Street got greedy. And when they got greedy, it caused this entire economy to crash. And since they were greedy and have crashed the economy, we get a little talk about Wall Street, a little talk about Main Street. As I said last time on this program, still, David, not enough talk about the side street. Here's the problem. The American public, I think, could handle this crisis much better if, along with all of the bailouts, there was a poverty agenda in this country. With all due respect to President Obama and Mr. McCain, 3 presidential debates between McCain and Obama, the word poverty never came up. There is no poverty agenda in this country. There is no talk about the weak working class. That's the problem here. There's got to be some accountability here. The Obama administration, I think, is out front being aggressive on some of these issues. But still, as your conversation earlier pointed out, not enough details, not enough people looking out for the weak working class.
But David Frum, I want to stay on this question of accountability with regard to the financial press generally and what could have been done. Because what's left out of this conversation is average Americans who were taking the money, who thought, at a salary of $40,000, $50,000, they could afford a $400,000 mortgage. So it was all around. What should have been done or said, and at what point?
The administration that was in power at the time, the Bush administration, which I served, had a problem through those years, which was there was not a lot of good economic news that affected the ordinary person. Incomes were flat. You could see the debt levels rising. There was one story, however, that you could tell that was a positive story, and that was the increase in the assets held by the average family because of the housing bubble. And nobody wanted to get in the way of that. Not the administration, not Congress, because if they did, what other good news would there be? And it's true that the financial press has tabloidized itself, and the multiplication of cable channels has meant that we talk about the news in a less serious way in all kinds of ways.
And we have the Washington Post now folding its business section into the front page, so we have less financial journalism.
But we had primarily a political failure, which was...
But why couldn't somebody have said very simply to David's question, tax cuts for the rich and lucky are not the answer? That's what needed to be said. That's what was not said, and that's why we're in this
That's a political point.
Right, that is more of a political point. It doesn't speak to some of the main issues in the financial system. Quickly here, and then I want to get into it.
Journalists are there to ask tough questions, whether it's the president who's in office or whether it's the businesses that they're talking to every day who are their sources. And I think that's what happened. What are we here for? What are we paid for as journalists? We're paid to ask the tough question and then to ask the follow-up question if we don't feel we got the answer.
Final question. What was wrong in the financial system? Was it knowable? Was it discoverable?
Yes, it was. It was way too much excess. Here's the easy thing you could have known. Anytime capital chases investments, you know you're in for a hard fall. It should be investment ideas that are looking for money. That's the normal way of the world. This was all backwards. It was the other way around, and that was how you could have known we were headed for.
I want to talk some Republican politics here in our